The network lied, the cast was broke, and Henry Winkler knew everything. ABC's biggest show was hiding some nasty secrets, sexual harassment claims from the very first episode, stars living in poverty while executives got rich, and the bitter feud that almost destroyed Ron Howard's career. After 50 years, the real story behind Happy Days will leave you speechless. In the 1970s, America was going through a rough time. The Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal had left people frustrated. Many wanted to escape into the past, and nostalgia for the 1950s was growing fast. Gary Marshall saw this as the perfect time for a TV show that felt warm and familiar. He wanted something that reminded people of simpler days, where families were close and teenagers worried about school dances instead of politics. His first attempt at this idea came in 1971 with a pilot called New Family in Town. Networks turned it down, but ABC decided to air it in 1972 as part of their anthology series Love, American Style. The episode was called Love and the Happy Day, but was later renamed Love and the Happy Days in syndication. The show didn't take off right away, but Marshall believed in it. He knew that a story about an all-American teenager and his family in 1950s Milwaukee had real potential. To make it feel authentic, the production team paid close attention to details. They used vintage cars, jukeboxes, and period-accurate outfits. A live studio audience added energy, making it feel more like a stage play than a typical sitcom. When Happy Days finally premiered in 1974, audiences were ready for it. The show was funny, wholesome, and comforting at a time when people needed it most. At first, the series focused on Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard. He was a clean-cut teenager dealing with everyday life, his family, his friends, and growing up in small-town America. But Marshall knew how to adapt. Over time, the show changed. It leaned more into comedy, and one character quickly stole the spotlight: Arthur Fonzarelli. With his leather jacket, motorcycle, and effortless cool, Fonzie became a cultural icon. His signature eye and thumbs-up gesture made him the face of the show. None of this would have happened without American graffiti. In 1973, George Lucas directed a film that celebrated teenage life in early 1960s California. Starring Ron Howard, it was a surprise hit, earning over $200 million on a budget of just $777,000. It proved that audiences loved stories about mid-20th century America. ABC executives saw the success and realized they had something similar in Marshall's pilot. That was the push they needed to greenlight Happy Days. When Happy Days premiered on January 15, 1974, it wasn't just another sitcom. It was a trip back to the 1950s, a time when jukeboxes, drive-ins, and leather jackets defined American culture. The show became an instant classic, and much of that success came from its unforgettable cast. Each actor brought something special, turning a simple family sitcom into one of the most beloved shows in television history. Ron Howard was already famous before he stepped into the role of Richie Cunningham. Audiences knew him as Opie from The Andy Griffith Show, but by the time Happy Days came around, he wanted to move beyond his child star image. Richie was the perfect role for him. He was the all-American teenager, a good kid trying to navigate friendships, high school, and family life. Howard wanted his performance to feel real, so he spent time studying old yearbooks and watching classic 50s shows like Father Knows Best. What many people don't know is that Happy Days didn't come out of nowhere. It started as a segment on Love, American Style in 1972 called Love and the Happy Days. Howard played Richie in that episode, which helped him land the role when ABC decided to turn the idea into a full series. While Richie was the heart of the show, Arthur Fonzarelli was the soul. Henry Winkler wasn't the first choice for the role. In fact, he was almost unknown when he auditioned in 1973, but his audition stood out. He didn't just read the lines, he added his own twist, delivering them in a calm, cool way before casually tossing his script in the air. That confidence won him the job. Fonzie was originally meant to be a minor character, but Winkler made him unforgettable. One of his most famous moments, checking his hair in the mirror without actually touching it, was completely improvised. The script called for Fonzie to comb his hair, but Winkler decided the Fonz wouldn't need to. He simply glanced in the mirror, nodded in approval, and walked away. It became one of the most iconic gestures in TV history. Fonzie's signature leather jacket almost didn't happen. ABC executives worried it made him look like a delinquent, but Gary Marshall, the show's creator, fought fought back. He convinced them to allow the jacket in scenes where Fonzie was near his motorcycle. That small compromise changed everything. By season 2, Fonzie's popularity exploded. He became the face of Happy Days, appearing on lunchboxes, comic books, and even action figures. Winkler's performance earned him 2 Golden Globe Awards, and Fonzie became one of the most famous TV characters of all time. While the show focused on Richie and his friends, it wouldn't have worked without Richie's parents. Marion Ross and Tom Bosley played Marion and Howard Cunningham, bringing warmth and humor to every scene. Ross had already impressed producers when she appeared in the Love American-style pilot, so she was an easy choice for the role. Bosley, on the other hand, almost didn't take the part. He turned it down at first, but changed his mind after reading a touching father-son scene in the script. Erin Moran, who played Joni Cunningham, was only 13 years old when Happy Days started. She had already appeared in the Love American-style pilot, which helped her land the role when the show became a series. At first, Joni was just the typical nosy little sister, but over time, she grew into a strong, independent young woman. Her relationship with Fonzie became one of the show's highlights. He affectionately called her Shortcake and treated her like a little sister, always looking out for her. Anson Williams had his own unexpected journey to Happy Days. He played Warren Potsy Weber, Richie's best friend. But on the day of his audition, his car broke down in the rain. He arrived late, soaking wet, but still made a great impression. He got the role, and over time, Potsy became more than just Richie's friend. He was a lovable, sometimes clueless character with a talent for singing. Don Most almost didn't play Ralph Malph. He originally turned down the role because he wanted to do dramatic acting, not comedy. Gary Marshall wasn't about to lose him. He played a game of basketball with Most's agent to convince him to reconsider. Most finally said yes, and Ralph Malph became an unforgettable part of the show. Happy Days premiered on January 15, 1974, as a mid-season replacement on ABC. It took viewers back to the mid-1950s, following Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard, and his life in Milwaukee. His father, Howard, played by Tom Bosley, ran a hardware store. His mother, Marion, played by Marion Ross, kept the family together with warmth and wisdom. Richie's younger sister, Joni, played by Erin Moran, had a sharp wit that often caught him off guard. His best friends, Potsy Weber and Ralph Malph, played by Anson Williams and Don Most, added plenty of laughs with their antics. At first, the show focused on Richie's experiences at home, school, and Arnold's malt shop. It captured the innocence of adolescence, but it also arrived at a time when America needed comfort. The country was dealing with Watergate and economic struggles, and audiences wanted an escape. The first season had 16 episodes, and even though critics were divided, people connected with its humor and heart. By the third season in 1976, Happy Days was the #1 show in America. Ratings soared, hitting a 31.5 Nielsen score, proving how much viewers loved its nostalgic charm. Music played a big role in setting the tone. The first season used Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and his Comets, giving the show an authentic 1950s feel. Later, it switched to an original theme song, Happy Days, composed by Charles Fox, with lyrics by Norman Gimbel. But nothing shaped the show's success more than Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, played by Henry Winkler. He started as a side character, but his leather jacket and effortless cool made him a fan favorite. Over time, Fonzie became just as important as Richie, and in many ways, even more. The show ran for 11 seasons, airing its final episode on July 19, 1984. It produced 255 episodes and sparked hit spin-offs like Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy. Decades later, Happy Days remains a cultural icon. It wasn't just a show about the past, it was a reminder of simpler times, something people still look back on with fondness. But everything was not perfect behind the scenes. When Happy Days first aired in 1974, it was meant to capture the innocence of teenage life in the 1950s. But decades later, some of its early episodes caused controversy. One of the biggest debates started in 2022 when a viewer in Canada filed a complaint after watching a rerun of the pilot episode All the Way on CHCHDT. The complaint went to the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, calling out the episode for sexism and racially insensitive language. One of the most criticized scenes involved Richie Cunningham and Mary Lou Milligan. She was described as having a reputation, and Richie followed advice from his friend Potsy on how to take advantage of that. He read seductive passages to her and even tried to undo her bra. Today, scenes like that are viewed as promoting harmful stereotypes. Another moment that stood out was when Mary Lou casually mentioned that her gym teacher had once tried to grab her sweater. Instead of treating it as a serious issue, the show played it as a joke. The episode also featured a joke where Richie and Potsy imagined an Eskimo becoming president and starting the World Series with a snowball. While the CBSC ruled that the comment referred to Alaska's climate rather than indigenous people, it was still seen as outdated and inappropriate. The fact that the episode aired without any content warning only added to the criticism. Despite these complaints, the CBSC ruled that the episode did not break any broadcasting codes. Instead, they said it reflected the time period in which it was made. But the debate didn't end there. Some argued that old shows should still be aired, but with disclaimers providing context. Others believed that certain content had no place on modern television, regardless of historical value. While Happy Days faced controversy over its content, there was also drama happening behind the scenes. From the start, Ron Howard's character Richie Cunningham was meant to be the lead, but by the second season, Henry Winkler's Arthur Fonzarelli had become the star. Fonzie was only supposed to appear in 7 episodes per season, but his popularity changed everything. By season 3, ABC executives saw an opportunity. They wanted to rename the show Fonzie's Happy Days to take advantage of Winkler's success. Howard was furious. He felt like he was being pushed aside, and he saw the name change as an insult to the rest of the cast. He was still under contract, but he made it clear that if they went through with it, he would consider leaving. At one point, he even thought about quitting television completely and going back to film school. The situation only got worse when reporters started asking Howard whether he felt like a second-class citizen on his own show. The media attention added pressure, but through it all, he and Winkler stayed close. Winkler saw what was happening and spoke up for Howard, pushing for more balanced screen time. In the end, the producers decided not to rename the show. They worked to keep the entire cast involved, and Happy Days continued to be a success. But the tensions were not over yet. In 2011, 5 cast members from Happy Days, Marion Ross, Anson Williams, Don Most, Aaron Moran, and the estate of Tom Bosley, filed a $10 million lawsuit against CBS. They claimed the network owed them money from merchandise that used their images. This included lunchboxes, trading cards, DVDs, and even slot machines. Their contracts promised them 5% of the net proceeds for merchandise featuring them individually and 2.5% for group appearances. But CBS argued that the actors were only owed small amounts, between $8,500 and $9,000 each, mostly from slot machine revenue. The issue came to light in 2008 when the cast saw Happy Days-themed slot machines in casinos. Fans assumed they were making money from them, but they weren't. Marion Ross was especially frustrated when people congratulated her, thinking she was cashing in. When the cast asked CBS about the money, the network admitted they were owed something but denied holding back millions. After failed mediation attempts, the actors decided to sue. The case was important because it wasn't just about Happy Days. It raised bigger questions about how studios handle merchandising royalties. Many actors sign contracts without knowing how their images will be used in the future. The lawsuit was settled in 2012. Each actor received $65,000, and CBS agreed to honor future merchandising deals. It was far less than the $10 million they wanted, but it set an important precedent for other actors in similar situations. While most of the cast struggled to get fair payment, Henry Winkler, who played Fonzie, was in a very different situation. His character became the biggest star of the show, and he had negotiated a separate deal that guaranteed him royalties from merchandise featuring his image. This caused tension among the cast. Don Most later called it unfair, pointing out that Winkler had been receiving payments for years, while the rest of them had to fight for anything at all. But Winkler wasn't part of the lawsuit. Since he had already been paid under different terms, joining the case would have complicated things. The financial gap between Winkler and his co-stars wasn't just about merchandise. During the show's run, he reportedly agreed to a lower base salary in exchange for a share of back-end profits. That decision paid off. Happy Days remained popular in syndication, and those profits kept coming. Many of his co-stars weren't as lucky. Some never received residual payments, and a few faced serious financial struggles. Erin Moran even lost her home to foreclosure. Happy Days was a huge success, but not everything that came from it lived up to expectation. The show sparked several spin-offs, some becoming hits, while others faded fast. One of the biggest failures was Joni Loves Chachi, which aired from 1982 to 1983. It followed Joni Cunningham and Chachi Arcola as they chased their music dreams in Chicago. Since their romance had been a big part of Happy Days, the network had high hopes. The show was heavily promoted, but audiences didn't connect with it. Critics felt it leaned too much on nostalgia without bringing anything new. Ratings dropped, and the show was canceled in its second season. Other spin-offs struggled just as much. Blansky's Beauties and Out of the Blue felt rushed and failed to capture the charm of Happy Days. Even bigger hits like Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy faced problems. They started strong, but behind-the-scenes conflicts and shifting creative directions caused them to lose momentum. Over time, fans started to see these spin-offs as attempts to cash in on Happy Days' popularity, rather than meaningful extensions of its world. Then came the moment that changed everything. On September 20th, 1977, Happy Days aired an episode called Hollywood, Part 3, which featured a scene that would go down in TV history. Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, strapped on a pair of water skis and jumped over a shark while still wearing his leather jacket. The stunt was meant to be exciting and show off Winkler's real-life water skiing skills. Instead, it became a symbol of a show losing its way. Even though Happy Days ran for 6 more seasons, something felt different after that episode. The show moved away from its grounded storytelling and leaned more into exaggerated plots, focused on Fonzie's larger-than-life persona. Over time, the phrase "jumping the shark" became a way to describe any TV show that took a ridiculous turn to stay relevant. Fred Fox Jr., who wrote the episode, later defended it. He believed it fit Fonzie's character and audience expectations at the time. In some ways, he wasn't wrong. Fonzie was always a bold and daring character, but for many viewers, that moment marked the beginning of the show's decline. Whether it truly hurt Happy Days or just added to its legend, it remains one of the most talked-about scenes in television history. By the early 1980s, Happy Days was starting to lose its magic. For years, it had been one of the most popular shows on television, bringing in millions of viewers every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. But as the decade moved forward, audiences were changing. People were no longer as interested in stories about the 1950s. They wanted something new. That shift in taste wasn't the only problem. ABC made a decision that hurt the show's success. In the 1982-83 season, they moved Happy Days to 8:30 p.m. to make room for new programming. That change might not seem like much, but it meant the show now had to compete with the A-Team on NBC. That series was packed with action, explosions, and fast-paced story. It quickly became a hit, pulling viewers away. By the next season, in 1983-84, ratings had dropped to number 63 in the Nielsen ranking, the lowest in the show's history. The loss of key characters made things worse. Ron Howard, who played Richie Cunningham, left after season 7 in 1980 to focus on directing. Donnie Most, who played Ralph Malph, also left around the same time. These were major losses. Richie had been the heart of the show. Ralph added humor and energy. Without them, Happy Days felt different. New characters came in, but they never quite captured the same magic. Even with these struggles, the show still had loyal fans. It wasn't pulling in the massive numbers it once had, but people still cared about the characters. That's why, when ABC decided it was time to end the series, they wanted to do it right. On May 8, 1984, the 2-part finale titled Passages aired. It was a special episode that wrapped up important storylines and gave longtime viewers the closure they needed. The biggest moment was Joni Cunningham and Chachi Arcola's wedding. Their romance had been a major part of the later seasons, even leading to a short-lived spin-off called Joni Loves Chachi. Seeing them finally get married was a fitting end to their story. Another emotional storyline followed Fonzie as he tried to adopt a young orphan named Danny. It wasn't easy. The legal system stood in his way, making it clear that a single man adopting a child would be a challenge. But with support from Howard Cunningham, Fonzie won the case. He had spent years being the cool rebel, but this showed a different side of him. He was ready to be a father. The most unforgettable moment came near the end of the episode. Tom Bosley, who played Howard Cunningham, turned to the camera and spoke directly to the audience. This wasn't something the show had ever done before, but it felt right. He raised a glass and thanked the viewers for being part of the Happy Days family. Then he said said the final words, "To happy days." After 11 years, it was a perfect goodbye. Oddly, Passages wasn't the last episode aired. Due to scheduling delays caused by the 1984 Winter Olympics, ABC aired 5 more episodes after the finale. They weren't meant to be part of the show's conclusion, so most fans don't consider them part of the true ending. For them, Passages was the real farewell. When Happy Days premiered on January 15, 1974, it wasn't just another sitcom. It was a trip back in time, a show that made the 1950s feel alive again. Set in Milwaukee, it followed Richie Cunningham, his family, and his friends as they navigated teenage life, family values, and the joys and struggles of growing up. The show ran for 11 seasons until May 8, 1984, becoming one of ABC's biggest hits. It wasn't just popular, it shaped American pop culture in ways no one expected. One of the biggest reasons for its success was a character who wasn't even supposed to be important. Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, played by Henry Winkler, started as a side character but quickly took over the show. With his leather jacket, slicked back hair, and effortless cool, Fonzie became the face of Happy Days. His catchphrase, "I," was impossible to ignore. Soon, he wasn't just a character, he was a pop culture icon. Fonzie also gave the world something unexpected. In Season 5, during an episode that aired in September 1977, he attempted a wild stunt, jumping over a shark while water skiing. At the time, it was meant to be an exciting moment, but years later, people looked back and saw it differently. The phrase, "jumping the shark," was born, now used to describe the moment when a TV show loses its spark. But Happy Days wasn't just about one character. It created an entire world. The show gave rise to some of television's most successful spin-offs. Laverne and Shirley, which ran from 1976 to 1983, followed 2 factory workers who had been introduced in Happy Days. Mork and Mindy, which aired from 1978 to 1982, introduced audiences to a young Robin Williams, playing the alien Mork in a bizarre but unforgettable episode of Happy Day. Even Joni Loves Chachi, which ran from 1982 to 1983, added to the show's legacy. For its cast, Happy Days was more than just a job. It was the start of major careers. Ron Howard, who played Richie Cunningham, left acting behind and became one of Hollywood's most respected directors, later winning an Oscar for A Beautiful Mind. Henry Winkler, after years of being typecast as Fonzie, found success as a producer and actor. In 2018, he won his first Emmy for his role in HBO's Barry. Other cast members also found steady work in television and film, proving that Happy Days was more than just a nostalgic sitcom. It was a launchpad. The show arrived at the perfect time. The 1970s were filled with political scandals and economic struggles. America was changing fast, and people needed something comforting. Happy Days gave them that. It was a version of the 1950s where family dinners solved problems, friendships lasted forever, and every challenge had a simple solution. That formula worked so well that it influenced later shows like Family Ties and Full House, proving that audiences would always love stories about family, friendship, and growing up. Critics had mixed opinions, but that didn't stop the show from earning awards and recognition. It received multiple Emmy nominations, though Henry Winkler never won one during its original run. In 1978, both Winkler and Ron Howard won Golden Globes for Best Actor in a Television Series. Over the years, Happy Days earned more than 18 wins and 21 nominations across various award shows. TV Guide later ranked it among the 50 greatest shows of all time, and in 2004, Tom Bosley, who played Howard Cunningham, was named one of TV's greatest on-screen dads.